Good afternoon and welcome to our Tuesday, May 7th, 2024 committee meetings here at Memphis-Shelby County Schools. Thank you for those of you who are present, as well as those of you who are listening and joining us. I'm going to ask my colleagues if you would introduce yourselves quickly and say your name for the record and your district. Althea Green, District 2.
Joyce Doyce Coleman, District 9.
Mauricio Calvo, District 5.
And Keith Williams, District 6. Keith Williams, District 6.
Thank you. We will now begin our Academic Performance Committee meeting, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Fagans.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Chair, first item is Brinks Incorporated. This is Armored Car Pickup Services. We're recommending that the board approves this award to Contract Brinks Incorporated for the amount of $753,268.34. This is a 2-year agreement that will pick up from 153 schools, and this is allowing three optional renewal periods for a term of 1 year each. And so, of course, this is just how we take care of transporting our funds.
So, yes, Mr. CFO. So, how much money are we really collecting from schools? I thought we were moving towards a cashless system, and what else? What kind of funds are these? Like book fees, lunch money, that type of thing.
Great question, Tito Langston, Finance. Great question, Commissioner Calvo. So, to your point, it could range anywhere from $1 to hundreds of dollars, depending on the day. So, the financial secretaries have a 3-day window where they have to deposit money into the bank. For this reason, I always like to, we've talked about this a couple times, this is a safety issue. Like I have a cashier that sits upstairs right now. Without this contract, she's having to take money to the bank, and whether it's $1 or $200, nobody knows how much she has that she's carrying. So for me on the basis, this is more of a safety issue with the number of schools and the district offices that we have. The liability is greater. So, but to your point, we'll probably never be completely cashless because some families just don't have the ability to have credit cards. They still use cash, but we did want to provide that option for parents like me who never have cash. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I know it's like a necessary evil, but hopefully this is something where we're trying to slow down. I mean, the reality is we can say that our parents will never be able to have that, but now more and more options. I know we're not in the business of providing financial literacy to parents, but parents have to pay for cashless things everywhere they go, right? So I'm just saying, like, if we're collecting, to your point, $5, but we're spending $2,000 a year per school, it's just or. I don't know, maybe, and even I get more worried when we say, hey, in 3 or 5 years, we're still spending the same amount of money, or is this eventually decreasing to something of the past? Or we create sorry to interrupt you, or we create a policy where we say, we just collect every week, right?
So as I alluded to, by audit standards, they have 3 days that they have to deposit the money into the bank. And if you caught with the receipt, it's an audit finding. So they do have that. We'll also tell you that we do steer the schools as well as even at these offices as much as possible. We want to be cashless. It's just not where we are 100% yet, but we are marketing into it at the school. I can even tell you at White Station Elementary, where my kids are, they are marketing that we go cashless as much as we can.
Has there been any consideration of the district owning its own transporting of money or using our security services for this? Because this is $500,000 we're paying we're paying as much as we're collecting, seemingly.
That's a great question. Actually, one of the questions that I asked myself. Right now, we have about 125 officers, but I can tell you that our officers are dedicated to schools right now. So, in order for us to look at that, and it's something that we possibly could, we would have to increase our number of officers to be able to fulfill this request. But it is something that we have looked into. It's a never say never. We'll continue to monitor and see if it's the most efficient way possible to transport cash.
I think overall, as we think about the amount, because it is significant, it's about the safety of the individuals, one, who are being requested and asked to receive, large amounts of money at some point, but just money in general, that it doesn't belong to them, and transporting that, the expectation of the same. I think we would place a false expectation, one, but an additional liability for the district. I think the magnitude and the size of our district is also a contributing factor. We have, more than 150 buildings that, we are managing the finances of and the transportation of money for the same. And so, you see the Brinks truck picking up outside of Target. You see them picking up outside of national corporations for this very reason, just to remove that particular responsibility from employees. It also goes in alignment to board commissioners and just general public who's listening and may, have some of these same valid concerns about the amount of the investment. It goes into many of the complaints that we receive about theft. When we are learning of, funds being exchanged through Cash App and things of that nature, and we can't track. And so as we think about our internal audit perspective also, this goes into that. When we remove the expectation and the responsibility and even the general opportunity to push money in a different way, then you allow employees to do just what they were hired to do, right? And so for our security, I think we know for sure we need them to be in buildings or in parking lots, or just generally wherever our students and our community members are. So it is a significant amount, but I think when we start to we weigh the cost benefits on the other side of it, it's probably worth it. Our second item is YMCA of Memphis and the Mid-South Master Services Agreement. This is for our before and after school services and our Summer Learning Academy. So we've given some data down at the bottom to kind of support as well. You can see before, after, and then before and after enrollment as it concerns cost as well. Since 2021 in terms of summer, and 2022 and 2023. This is recurring, and so we would be entering year 3 of 3 of this particular agreement. And so the recommendation is for approval of the contract for the continued services not to exceed the amount of $700,000.
Superintendent, are we going to get a list of the summer learning academies that are available for our students?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Does either the state or the parents help subsidize this fund? The 700,000, the before after care.
Is either parents or state subsidize the program?
Oh, so for our summer learning academies particularly, we as a district have over the past few years made the summer learning academy free for all families for before and after care. So that's what this expense is. During the year, parents pay, but specifically for summer learning academy, this amount is not to exceed $700,000. Is going to take care of the before and after care for all the parents and the students who participate.
Cool. All right. I hope that we are advertising that as an added benefit. So, all right, thanks.
Is there any reason why it is not in the schools?
No, it is in the schools.
Will you clarify your question for me, Commissioner Williams? So it's in the school location on their campus. It's just happening before school and then after school during those hours for some of our families.
So what is the role of the Y?
You want to know why don't we do it ourselves, right?
Precisely.
Well, Commissioner Williams, I asked the same, and so right now, will carry out this particular agreement as we think about the costs. And so the team did provide the costs of what that would look like for us to own this, because we also want to expand it. And so you can, as you see the numbers at the bottom, while it's 600 children, we think about the number of children that we serve, it's not a large number of students. And so how do we expand the services also comes with considering how much the expansion costs. So we're looking at it while we continue to offer the type of service that we've already provided without breaking that particular exposure, because those who do attend have generally shared pretty good experiences and narratives about the same.
There was a time when it was in-house.
Yes, sir.
Teachers took advantage of it for employment and the teacher assistants and so on. So who are the workers? Does the Y still hire our employees?
The Y still hires their own employees, yes.
They hire Shelby County Schools teachers.
They do, well, they hire people who apply for the position, so they can hire outside of the district, as well as hire teachers within the district. And Stephanie can share as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Superintendent. Yes, about 50% of the employees the Y hire are Mscs employees. They actually have first priority for hires. And the Y has also committed to paying MSC employees our rate of pay versus the Y rate of pay.
What is the rate of pay?
Our current rate of pay for assistants is between $18 and $20 an hour. So it's based on that individual's pay.
Commissioner Williams, we're also looking to use this as a way into our educator pipeline as we think about expanding that. And so I will begin to have recurring meetings with the COO, Mr. McLaughlin, actually starting tomorrow, as we think about how we can get some of these individuals, and the YMCA would, contribute to much of this, to becoming certified instructors, and that's how we continue to expand and build our teacher pipeline as well. And so there's some additional benefits that can exist from this also, but you do have the commitment from me that we are looking at how do we own some of this internally, either in addition to or certainly as we think about how we move forward on the other side of this third year. Is that satisfactory? Yes, sir.
Are they charged a fee for the facility?
We're in our facilities. It's at our schools.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We keep it home.
Okay.
Item 2.3, we're recommending that the board approves the award and master contracts. This is for our OT, PT, our occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, audiology interpreters for the deaf. This is for several vendors, if you will, to provide these services at various amounts, from $15 million is the total, and then the estimated amount is broken down by each respective service provider. This particular agreement has a term of 1 year, and then it reserves the districts the unilateral option of extending the term for 2 additional terms, 1 year each, not to exceed 3 years.
I have a question, Madam Superintendent.
Yes?
So obviously, in very much of support of this, I have asked the CFO, so I can ask both of you. Obviously, TISA formula allows additional funding for students who have any specific needs. To me, this is low-hanging fruit, and we have spoken about that. How well are we identifying the children that have needs for 2 purposes? One, and most importantly, so we can better serve them, but also so we can receive the adequate funding from the state. I want the record to reflect that we are being as intentional as we can, because there's some specific populations, and I'll speak about my own community. Oftentimes, parents who may be English language learners, they may not realize that these services exist, right? Or they don't know, like they probably think like, oh, this kid just doesn't speak English, and that's why he's just not listening well, right? So I want to emphasize that we continue to do a good job, not only with English language learners, but in general to identify these kids for those 2 purposes.
Absolutely. And we even emphasized that earlier during the huddle with our multicultural families about emphasizing and really underscoring, our work there and how we do better about meeting those needs.
Is there a disparity, a large disparity between these independent people and contract people and employees of the district who do these same jobs, speech pathologists and the like?
So I don't think that we're talking about disparity here, Commissioner Williams. I think we're talking about availability in terms of capacity. We just don't have the number of people that we need to meet the level of need that we have. And so if we could hire all these people internally, we would certainly do so. And so where you see the various, service providers existing is so that we generally, and I think we're just barely meeting the need that we know exists. This doesn't consider the students, in terms of, we haven't tested or they're just generally not receiving the services. And so I'm not sure that it's a disparity as much as it is about availability.
Is the financial accommodation the same for all positions, whether they are outsourced or in-house? Is there a difference between the pay?
Oh, you're asking specifically about pay for internal, so a physical therapist or an occupational therapist that we may have internally, and then one that may be receiving pay here. I'll let the Chief Financial Officer speak to it specifically so that you have dollar amounts.
So, Commissioner Williams, really good question. So, as with any opportunity when you outsource, there could be a gap in pay of what you pay because you're paying the company to kind of find the therapists, if you will. So, if you put a price per expenditure towards the contract versus what we do in-house, then we're paying a little bit more for outsourcing it because we can't provide the service in-house. What I can tell you is that Dr. Fagans, as early as 2 weeks ago, sat with myself and the Exceptional Children team to look at increasing our pay so that we can bring more of this stuff in-house as we continue to look at the budget. Yes, sir.
Superintendent, approximately how long between a child being diagnosed as needing these services and receiving them, how long of a time frame is that, or do we have an idea for that?
I think when I took a general look at the information that was provided, our services are available immediately where they exist. And so it's really about where the students are placed in terms of schools and where we might have this particular service or not, or whether they're traveling from day to day because they're servicing multiple schools. So the significance of the need, not to say that one is less than the other, but prioritizing the priority is how we look at it until we're able to move more of the resources directly into the building. And so what you heard Mr. Langston mention is when I reviewed with the team, the general question was, why aren't the people just in the buildings? Like we have enough where we can kind of spread them out and they can be available in the buildings, which to your question would decrease any wait time that they would have to receive a service where there might be some. But overall, I would say that the services that are necessary are generally being delivered because the team has prioritized the placement based specifically on where those students are.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Board Commissioners, item 2.4, this ELL, I've removed that for further review. And so we will go to 2.5, which is Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. We're just asking the board to approve our acceptance of this non-recurring funding. This is one-time funding, and it will generally cover the cost of about 12 months of clinical supervision and then a 2-day training session. So this is still focused on our trauma practices and our cognitive behavioral therapy. This will cover about 80 social workers and school psychologists in the mental health center. So certainly we know what's on the other side of this as we think about experiences with traumatic events and the need to meet these specific needs, and then the general request for the same services.
I have a question. I noticed that's non-recurring. we should have definitely accept 80 social workers if we can. Do we have a plan for sustainability once this grant finishes?
So these are our social workers already, so we wouldn't be receiving additional ones for this particular grant. This will take care of the training that would come along with it for about this number.
Okay.
And so sustaining it is, are we able to apply for this again?
Dr. Goins?
I know it's non-recurring, but I believe I read something that was connected to it, but not the same, that exists, or am I making that up?
Okay, it is a one-time, non-recurring, and the training will be for all the social workers, but we will also have a piece in there where we can train certain numbers to be the trainers.
Okay, so we train the trainer.
Right, so that
So
will-
that's the way to continue it.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
So item 2.6, this is the recommendation. This is just for ratification so that we can take care of the payment for our Rethink SEL curricula. This was used to provide general, SEL competencies across the district. And so this is in the amount of $330,000. There were 140 schools that were tracked. About 89% of the schools completed these lessons. And only about 11% progressing to implement, but this will take care of what essentially is owed.
I love this, but can I have a little bit of an overlook of what exactly, maybe somebody in staff tell, what does this do? I know it's social emotional learning, but how do we implement it? I saw that 89% of the schools being tracked are in track, per se.
So the general idea with providing this is virtual, it's online, and so there are just a set of sessions, if you will, opportunities for students. Well, I did have a really transparent conversation with the team about not just the use of it, but do we have the data that demonstrates that it's effective? Right. I'm only about doing things that are effective and impactful. So if we can provide the data that shares that, a certain number of students share that because of this particular curriculum, that their emotional distress is lowered, or they feel more capable of governing their emotions, or anything that we're saying comes on the other side of this, then of course we can explore continuing it. And so haven't been able to receive that in such a way that gives me confidence to continue with it, but certainly where it has been used, we want to make sure we make good on rendering the payment. I think that when I think about social emotional learning, as I share with the team and teachers who have generally expressed their dismay about this particular platform, is that social emotional learning is all day, every day. It's in relationships. It's as simple as knowing the name of a student. It's as deep as knowing their interest. And it's everything that comes in between. It's relationships, relationships, relationships. And I'm not sure that we get the best to our young people in this regard through, virtual learning or placing them on the computer yet one more time.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Item 2.7 is a MOU. This is ASD. As you know, we are receiving the school back from the ASD, MLK is, and so this will allow us to accelerate the timeline and be able to prepare for receiving the school back to the district and make the type of preparations to the facility. As you know, we can't get into the facility until, and so that's what this MOU stands to do, is to move this date back just a little bit than it was written originally. Item 2.8 is school transitions, and so we've just identified the actual schools that are returning to the district, and we're just recommending that the board approves the exit plans for Coleman School, Fairleigh High School, Humes Middle School, Martin Luther King Jr. College Preparatory, and then Westside Middle School. When we accept these particular plans, of course, it just allows us to support the students and their families appropriately and welcome them in the way that they should be back to the district.
So Superintendent, going a little bit back to the previous one, the transfer, you said you'd like to see it pushed back. Is there a date tentative that you'd like to see it pushed back to?
So we'd like to do it, allow the facility transfer to be effective June 1.
Oh, okay, so that is
Right.
the.
That would be the
pushback
effective
then.
date, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so other than that, I believe it was well into, or July, or well
July
into the
1.
year, or something like that. So this month would help us go ahead and
Oh,
get started.
pulling it
Yeah.
forward.
So I may have
Okay,
used the
that's
wrong
what I
term.
was-
Is it back or forward?
All depends on how you look
One
at
of the
it.
two, we can think about which term is correct, but
Okay.
make it earlier, sooner than it
There we go.
was,
Okay.
before, than what it originally was, so we can go ahead and do the work. Thank you for that clarity.
Madam Superintendent, could you elaborate, update us on the communication plan, like the parents feel informed? Are there going to be any changes? I mean, some parents wait until the end of the summer to, notice these things, like, yeah.
Right. So we will continue to do it. We have the community engagement sessions that we led in person and still leading in person. We certainly sent letters out to families and students, robocalls. We've managed the communication through the staff as well. And then our online, our virtual through Teams, leading those also. And then generally most of them will be able to come and see the school if they'd like to before, starting back on August the 5th. And so really we've worked around the clock, the team has, to make sure that any type of communication that we can provide, we provide it immediately and then certainly consistently in numerous ways to catch some of those that you're mentioning that may not even pay attention to it until well after May 24th when we're out of school.
Thank you. What staffing levels, the people who currently work in those schools, for the most, when these things happen, for the most part, they stay, they come back? Are we okay with providing?
Right. So it's really both and. Sometimes they leave, sometimes they stay. But what we have done is extended our transfer deadline. And so they have, opportunities. If it's not the current school that they're in, they do have the same opportunities that we've afforded our currently internal personnel to kind of shift to different spaces. But certainly if they'd like to remain at the school that they are in, then that's where they can remain.
Because these are not our current employees, right? They're usually employees of our operator.
Right.
So they don't automatically become.
They don't automatically become, that's right. Any more questions? All right. Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
that concludes.
I added an item 2.09, more from Memphis. This is a project that we started a couple of years ago. I don't want us to lose momentum. I asked Mr. Sturgis if he would come and just give us a very high-level overview presentation this afternoon to our committee meeting. Thank you for coming.
I don't know if this is on. It's on. Okay, great. It's wonderful to see board members, superintendent, to share again a little bit of an update. We can provide more formal materials, but wanted to make sure we didn't lose an opportunity to touch base with this committee, this important committee making decisions around the support of children. So More for Memphis is a 5-year strategic plan that calls for currently the investment of over $1.4 billion in the lives of children and families. The school systems are a critical part of that equation. And so in May of 2023, we entered into an agreement with the school board to ensure we brought back that plan and its formal proposals to this board for consideration. That's currently also happening with the Shelby County Commission, the City of Memphis, private philanthropy, the state of Tennessee, and every opportunity we can find federal grants and state grants to align those resources into communities and support the outcomes of kids and families in the schools where they need it the most. And that's the critical piece of More for Memphis, the alignment of systems and the alignment of effort to these strategic priorities that the community has proposed and developed. And so there's an opportunity for the board to review those materials, think about that strategic plan as you move into FY25. Obviously, to think about that in terms of the transition planning that's happening currently with the system. I want to make sure that information is available to you all for that work. And so primarily, that's what we want to touch base with today, answer any questions. But the plan is finalized in what it's proposing. For an example, we've worked with the district administration very deeply over the last year with over probably Dr. Whitelaw, probably 15 or so planning meetings across departments to really understand how private investment and effort could align with the great work the district's doing and to really lay that out in a strategic vision. That includes all the way from prenatal investments to post-secondary opportunities for our students and families to move the economic agenda of our community forward. So we can provide that plan and want to make sure that you're aware of that, and any formal presentation to the board, happy to provide it.
Thank you. I have a question regarding, I'm sorry, I just jumped in there, is that all right? So how are things going? You mentioned about you're working with the county commission, the city council. How is all of that coalescing? And then what's next steps for MSCS?
Yeah, so currently each of those entities is reviewing their plan, their FY25 opportunities for alignment. Just left a meeting actually at the county government office. And so I think there's a way for us to really identify some strategic priorities for partnership. Obviously wouldn't want to take that, that's really a board's decision, but we think there are some very strategic opportunities where everyone is aligned on priorities like early literacy, youth violence prevention, and other elements of the plan that really highlight opportunities for systems to work better collaboratively together, and alongside private capital that can do things that perhaps public systems can't do.
And I just want to say, for full disclosure, so I've been working with More for Memphis since this iteration of it started 3 years ago, but it actually dates back to 2018 when we started working with pre-K, with the county, and what have you. And so I've seen a lot of progress, but we're really at the precipice of this big grant that's going to be coming into the community. So just want to let my colleagues know that this is something that I've been in support of, been to lots of meetings on this, and so I would love to see us continue to work with the city and the county to bring this to fruition.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, this board is the largest investor in children and families in this county. And I think it's important to reflect on that and how your power and potential can help leverage and bring that table together. So thank you, Board Member McKissick, and all of the board members here who have been a part of that work.
Are there, so Commissioner McKissick mentioned, the work that is happening in the county and the city. Are there any low-hanging fruit or priorities, as the superintendent says, prioritizing the priorities that as we get ready to begin the new school year, like can we do anything this summer? I know this particular body is going to go on a board retreat and other things. Are there any priorities that we should be aware that we should be aligning with?
I think this community is holding a sense of urgency around our response to youth, and the superintendent's leaned into that space, coming in full speed. And I think there is this really commitment across all those entities to think about how we're supporting children and families and students, particularly young people who may be disconnected from opportunities today, and reconnecting them into safe and stable and supportive environments. So I think that's a real opportunity to look at. Even the state has interest in that space. Early learning work that we've all collaborated on for the last 5 years, there's an opportunity to deepen that. The current More for Memphis plan, which took the Strategic Partners for Literacy work, our First Aid Memphis work, and our community coalition around early literacy, and really combine that with district input into a comprehensive approach, that calls for about $184 million of investment over the next 5 years to do that strategic partnership with literacy intervention. And I think that so there are important things like that in the plan that are anchored in outcomes. And I'll just call out that the plan as proposed, it's not just asking the public systems to do more. We're trying to align almost $400 million of private dollars over the next 5 years alongside you all. And we're starting with $100 million of commitment to invest in that starting in FY25 as well. And to do that, we believe that with those resources alone, we could help get 10,000 young people on a pathway to economic mobility. And then really targeting that in communities where those opportunities have partners, momentum, and schools that are willing to partner with us.
Mark, I remember when you came here with the Gates Initiative. What successes can you point to that you have already achieved from your program that will advance what we're doing now? And I'm sure that it has served a purpose, and you worked hard in it. So what has your success looked like from the time you started to date?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. We have been at the table for a long time. The Gates Foundation work going all the way back to, 2006. But yeah, there's been a lot of successes, a lot of challenges along the way. I would point to our early learning partnership. If you look at kids who started getting those aligned high-quality pre-K services back in 2014, we can track those young people, and shout out to my partner in data, Mr. Bill White over there. If we look at data on those kids who are in 7th and 8th grade, they're statistically outperforming kids who did not get those early learning interventions.
That would be a good thing for us to see.
Very important. And you look at young people who get summer learning interventions who are coming to school without losing their ELA gains from the prior year. When students have those supportive partnerships in schools, they're more likely to attend school. I can point back to data in 2017 where we all collaborated on chronic absenteeism. One of the only years, I think, in this community where chronic absenteeism went down statistically. And we had everybody at the table. That's when those partnerships really work, where we hold each other accountable, we focus on big outcomes and big strategies and interventions, and we work collaboratively together. And I think that's what this plan really puts on the table. Breaking down those silos between governments, just like in early learning, where now the city, county, and schools, and see Patrice over here who really helped us put that together on all sides of the table, from the city and county and now at the district. So, we've been in a community of partnership for years, and this is really thinking about ways in which we can formalize that moving forward at a level that our community is looking for. So appreciate the question. There's a lot of great successes. We need to do more, though.
I just want to say thank you. We appreciate your leadership and your commitment to this district. And I know often from just being on the board a few years, each time we get new administration, we sometimes just kind of put things on the back burner. But Superintendent Fagan is committed to working. She loves partnerships, collaborative, and everybody's funding. So we're excited to stay on this path. Thank you for coming and presenting. If we have more questions, we will just blow your phone up and your email.
Anytime.
So I just wanted to say thank you.
Anytime. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, this ends the academic committee meeting. Amber, you have a question?
I just wanted to add, I think board members have expressed different investments we want to make and that are already aligned to data we're already collecting and getting that picture of the things we want to focus on. But I heard the city and county are kind of identifying their key components. I think in the next 3 or 4 weeks, that will become very clear as we also learn Dr. Fagan's transition plan. If the board is amenable, I would love for you to come to our board retreat to present and actually nail down what those things are so we can put some sort of partnership agreement in place. Because I think that while the number one priority of Dr. Fagan's is changing the culture and the way we're viewed as a district, if we do that arm in arm with the city and county, I think that also gives us power as West Tennessee, Shelby County, when we're thinking about the perception of us at the state level too. So we've had a lot of those conversations, but would that be something that your team could do?
Yeah, absolutely. We can make ourselves available and our partners who have been a part of this as whatever's helpful for the retreat.
Okay, great. Well, I'd just love to keep momentum going.
Thanks.
Thank you. This ends the academic committee meeting, and we will kick it over to Vice Chair Coleman.
Thank you, Chair Green. We will go right into our procurement committee meeting. I am Joyce Coleman, District 9.
Mauricio Calvo, District 5.
Keith Williams, District 6.
Oh, Michelle McKissick, District 1.
Amber Hewitt Garcia, District 8.
Althea Green, District 2.
We'll get right into it. The 2.01 charter school leases. Or do we need to wait on superintendent?
I do have some questions if we want to,
Hold on.
but
Hold on.
no, if Michelle was going to present on them, so I'll hold them. Cool.
We're going to hold on just for a moment, wait on superintendent. Thank you.
2 minutes.
All right. The superintendent typically waits for no one, so to follow her lead.
Thank you, Superintendent. Our agenda says 2.01, but the paper says 3.1, so for,
All right, well, we'll definitely start with number one, and we'll do charter leases. And so the recommendation here is to approve one-year leases for MACE, or Memphis Academy of Science and Engineering, Journey Community Schools, and then Coleman Elementary School at Coleman Elementary School, and then Fraser Community Schools at Westside Middle School. These three authorized charter schools by the district are currently operating in our facilities, and so, of course, they need a lease to continue through the 2024-25 school year. What this does is just allow me more time to take a look at facilities and really see how we move forward with these respective spaces to make a definitive decision moving forward without impacting their particular service to students.
I have a question. How were the building rates and the leases, the lease amounts determined? The $2.15 a square foot.
Michelle?
I have a second part to it, which is, are we considering any investments essentially renters are making into these properties with deferred maintenance?
Answer that last part first, and so that's what this allows me to do. We don't currently have a real estate plan, and so what we've been building out is an actual real estate plan that allows us to best maximize not just these facilities, but our vacant facilities, any space that respectfully we can make money, and we can just utilize and serve to benefit the district as we think about the valuable property that we have, but also in this regard, just thinking about how we certainly service the students that are there and the authorizers, charter authorizers that are there, but in the way that, at a rate that is satisfactory for the same.
So with that in mind, the $2.15 per square foot was the rate that the board approved for MACE last year. If you recall, MACE was forced out of their building, which is across the street from Northwest Prep, because of a storm. We accommodated them on a temporary permit for the end of the 22-23 school year, and then last year the board voted to let them lease for 1 year Northwest Prep at $2.15 a square foot. So the other rates for Westside and Coleman were done that way to make it equal across the board while superintendent prepares the real estate plan.
So where did 215 come from?
Oh, it was arrived at, so back a long time ago, we used to have the $4.59 per square foot, and that was for a building in good condition. Northwest Prep was in such poor condition that they knew they were going to have to put at least $500,000 into the building just to operate that year. So that was backed out. And since then, they have documented all of the money they've spent in our building.
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
They've documented all the money that they've spent in the Northwest Prep facility.
Okay, so are we accounting for that in the second year? So we are, this 215, we believe that we're making them whole on that.
Absolutely. It's
Okay.
still a lower lease rate than we
Are
would
these
normally offer.
continuations of leases for the other two, or is this the first time in the building?
The other two were ASD schools, so they were in our buildings for free, and this will be the first year that they're in our buildings as district authorized charters. So they have to have a lease agreement now.
Okay. Thank you.
I will defer to my academic colleagues.
You're asking about all three? Do you have that, Ms. Park, on hand? Yes. So let's go ahead, we can make sure we give you that data. And the data that we do not have, we'll make sure that we follow up and get that to you all, board members. You're asking about MACE and Journey Community.
Good evening, Commissioners, Superintendent, Arlandra Parker from the Office of Charter Schools. Academically, the state report card for Westside. Westside is a CSI school with, Westside Middle that is a CSI school with a state letter grade of F. And then Journey Coleman is also a CSI school with a state letter grade of C. And I currently don't have MACE, but I can get that information to you.
Michelle, I'm not sure that I heard the answer, or maybe I misunderstood the question. So my question was, we know that we moved them in there on an emergency basis because of the winter storm that year. Since they have been in there, have you been keeping up with what they've been spending on the building? I think was my question.
Yes, we have.
So we have been.
We have been keeping up with it. I don't have it with me right
Okay.
now, but I can get it for you.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the schools are all three operational right now, and Westside and Coleman are in school right now. So I'm sure they do have plans. From Fraser Community Schools, I have a list of investments they intend to make, but they are not, pressing, if you will. So if they do spend money in our buildings, the district owns anything that they place into the buildings or grounds. That's part of the lease.
Which is very standard in any lease, right? You lease a space, you fix it, that becomes part of the landlord. And I agree with the superintendent that we're doing these short-term leases as we become into something more sustainable. One question that I have is, do charter schools, I know charter schools are eligible, I mean, technically everybody's eligible to receive foundation money or private money for bailouts. Does the state give additional money to charters that they don't give to us for this type of, for renovations, for capital improvements, even when they don't own the building?
Great question. So to your point, yes, the charter schools get a direct funding allocation for capital improvements that we don't get. Obviously, we get ours from the county, and then they get theirs directly from the state.
So we say, when you say, sorry to interrupt, when you say we get ours from the county and we fight for that money, or we automatically get that money?
Say it one more time.
We have to advocate every year for that money, right?
That's correct. So there's
There's not an automatic.
That's correct. It's not automatic. It's if when they decide that they were going to pass it along to us, as I always like to take the opportunity to say we didn't get any deferred maintenance this year.
No.
But to your point,
you only remind us every month. Yeah.
But to your point, charters, they get a direct allocation for capital, and if it was done in the BEP, it's also done in TISA as well.
Okay.
Well, not necessarily. We don't pass on CIP to capital, to charters. We don't pass, so when we get CIP, we do it for our buildings internally. We don't pass along any of those funds. Only thing we pass along to charters is what we get from the general fund and what we get as far as the per pupil allocation for students. So anything we get capital related, we don't pass to charters. Can I go back to your original question? My apologies. You asked about how we derived at 215. One of the reasons we derived at 215, from what I remember, is that we took a deferred maintenance commercial formula way back from 22, 23, I believe. That formula, which I can get for you, is kind of how we determine the normal cost of what it would be for deferred maintenance for a building that derived us from 459 to 215. I can get that if I can find it. It was a couple years ago for you, if that makes sense.
No, I trust that you all have done the math there, and that makes sense.
and this is just something for consideration, is that we should work out a plan. I think a one-year lease is a great solution to make sure we're not displacing kids and disrupting staff and all that needs to happen to make sure continuity of education. But as we're developing a plan, if I rented an apartment and I put a bunch of money in it and then I didn't get to buy it, like, I think that we want anybody who is in our buildings making the best decision for investments, and that doesn't mean that we write them a check for everything that they've paid for, but somehow if we do decide we don't want this building, we don't need it in our inventory, and they have the opportunity to buy it, that is taken into consideration in the purchase price. I know that's far greater than whatever the lease would be, but just like, let's keep track of what's getting invested in our buildings, and also consider what is the benefit of someone having managed that maintenance process too. So it's not just the cost, but also they do all of the work that we have many work streams and projects going through the pipeline. So there's a benefit to the district too. So I just want to make, whether it's a school or another partner in our building, thinking about what they invest and how that shakes out if we do decide to sell a property.
Just to play devil's advocate for just a second here, and I completely understand what you're saying, but at the same time, my first thought and commitment is to Mscs proper, and that, this is an educational institution, but it's also, this is a business. And that is something just to incur the cost of doing business with the district. And I think for too long, we've handed out a lot for free to a lot of people. And I just remember the transition from MCS to SCS during the merger. So I understand that, and I hear what you're saying, and I've served on a charter school board, but at the same time, I'm like, what's going to be beneficial most for MSCS and the clientele that we serve our students and educators? So just want to say that for the record. Thanks.
I want to echo that. I think, I'm not a real estate expert, but $2.15, even $4.50, there's nothing in this town that you can buy or rent. I mean, that you can rent for that amount of money. I mean, I'm often someone who speaks in support of charters because I believe in that and support of community partners. But there's, to Commissioner McKiskey's point, there's a cost of doing business. If somebody decides to open a charter school in a former Kroger, or in one of our former schools, it's going to cost a bunch of money. And whatever improvements they make to that building, the old Walgreens or the old whatever, they're not going to give them anything back. And I will have an issue if we were charging $50 just to make it difficult. So we don't have to make it impossible. But I know later in today we're going to talk about selling Germantown High. Like, we shouldn't sell Germantown High for $10 either, right? Just because it's a public building. Precisely because it's a public building, we owe to the taxpayers to be mindful to those resources and put that money back into education. So I very much, Superintendent, support your strategy of getting some very savvy real estate agents and people doing this, because it's a lot. Like, this is money that we're taking away. Money that we give away is money that we take away from other services that are very much needed in serving children. It's not like we're splitting the proceeds and taking it all home, right? I guarantee we're not. So we need to put that money back into our students. Thank you.
I appreciate the discussion and rebuttal from my colleagues too. It was something just for consideration, and I think we are talking about it in 3 specific charter school examples. But when we do a comprehensive facilities plan, some of our buildings may not be charter schools. They may be affordable housing. Sure. So what would the benefit to our students if we're thinking about if we had stable housing and they're actually attending school every day, if there's a health clinic there, we think about what is the benefit to our children beyond just thinking about it in the context of a charter school, thinking about how can that, whatever property we have, serve students and meet needs. So just taking the full picture, and that is why we do need a comprehensive plan.
And I couldn't agree more. Just my last comment on the matter, but just for example, our graduations coming up. We have graduations at the Renaissance Convention Center, and I've been championing this for a while, that, you know, that's another city-owned property. And one would think, oh, well, gosh, these are the kids of this city, and maybe just let them have those facilities for free. They don't. They charge us. I mean, they charge us. And so I just, no one has that level of sympathy back toward this district. And so we need to keep all that, everything you said. I'm not invalidating any of it, but just saying that let's keep it all in perspective and do right by our children, but at the same time, being paid fairly is also doing right by the children. Thanks.
Our next item is Fairleigh High School network cabling. The recommendation is that the board approves a purchase order for $568,957.50. This is to provide network cabling and wireless access for all the devices for the students at Fairleigh High School as we work to receive them back into the district. This also includes cabling for security cameras there as well, as we work to establish or to continue to expand our installation of security cameras for safety measures. No, sir, they're not the only one returning, but in terms of the assessment of the needs in cabling and wireless services, this is where the need exists. For this particular area, in terms of cabling and networking, no, sir. Now, expenses in general, yes, sir, we do have some expenses, but expenses as it specifically concerns network cabling just for wireless services, we're at Fairleigh High School.
Superintendent, these schools that are coming back to us, do we know how many students we're going to have to provide one-to-one devices for?
Good question. So at each school, I think we're at a total, have we hit 1,000 yet in terms of total number of students? Or just right over?
Right now, we're over the number 1,000, including Fairleigh, including the students that are going back from MLK, and then also including the students that we are counting from Humes.
Is it just right over, though? Like, is it 1,100, if I can recall? I may
As
be
a matter
making
of
this
fact, I
up.
can give you the number
Get
exactly.
the numbers.
I have it in my file.
But the number of students specifically needing one-to-one services in terms of laptops and all of that, it's more so about, I think they're using Chromebooks in some places, and we don't use Chromebooks. So it's making sure that they have the actual laptops and technology that we have, so that they operate on the same service and platform that we have as well.
So are we starting now to look at purchasing these so it won't be the end of August and we're still waiting on students to receive them?
That's correct.
device?
So you have this item here, but there'll be an additional item that will come. I just asked the team to do a little bit more review in terms of the assessment of the need. And so you'll see the other schools being accommodated in terms of the needs for services, technology services, and anything else.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am?
I have the numbers.
You have the numbers?
Currently, Humes projected to transition 100 students altogether. I mean, the Humes current enrollment is 180 students, and then we also have where they're projected to go. Also at MLK, they are 500. Tresvant current enrollment is 530 students. We're planning to transition 450 students from MLK to Tresvant, but we also know that students have selected, they had the right to select from 3 schools, Craigmont, Raleigh Egypt, as well as, I'm missing one, Tresvant itself. And so we are working on those registration numbers as well. 108 parents have expressed interest in their children attending Craigmont, 90 to Raleigh Egypt High School. So again, we're keeping up with the numbers to make sure that they register because they just expressed an interest. And then Fairleigh current enrollment with the number of students currently where they are right now is 388 students.
Additional questions? Okay. Our next item is a MOU with MPD for services for crossing guards, and so we're just recommending to the board to approve this MOU to provide the crossing guards not to exceed $370,000. I think there's just a continued request and general understanding of the existence of crossing guards to support our students who are traveling from near and far, and to provide that safety support, and the city of Memphis agrees to providing the same.
Similar to the earlier question. I know this is for the summer academy. Can we next year look if our security guards could provide that service? I know our officers are deployed to the buildings, but during the summer, does that demand increase?
Does the demand decrease for security over the summer, where that we could balance providing some as crossing guards, and then certainly continuing the use of placement for others? Absolutely. Trust. We look at it the same. You know, there's a balance of the time that I'm entering, right, and not stretching the team too far with, you know, bringing a whole lot in, and I think they're nodding their heads, and I'm stretching them. So, you know, we do this for this summer as we think about how we own. I just want us to own all of our work, if you will. This is money that, if nothing else, we can pay our own people, and so certainly there we align.
And write it into the job descriptions.
That is exactly it. Strengthen how we provide supports. Any additional questions?
How many elementary schools will have the Summer Learning Academy?
We have 31 elementary schools, 1 K-8, 4 middle schools, and 2 high schools.
So it's just for the 31 elementary schools?
The crossing guards, yes, ma'am. Any additional questions? All right.
I know they kept going. I mean, I don't think we got, but I got some things about, if we're putting $100,000, we should.
See, we don't have anything on here about Germantown. That's why I stopped you. You know.
What time do we finish studies? Oh, 3 o'clock?
Yeah, it started at 3.
No,
We got a special no.
What time is the special call? 5?
5, yeah.
Oh, that time.
Yeah. How are you? Get you some candy. You want a bit of honey, honey? You want a bit of honey? Get you one.
Yeah, how we do? Yeah, something happened. I have an answer to your question. Oh, yeah. I'll leave you with this. 3 minutes. Get it away before I change my mind. Everybody's meeting at the TLA. No, don't do it like that. What a terrible experience, right? It'd be a different experience. Thank you. Okay.
4:30.
Oh, no, she's coming back from, no, she's talking about something else. You're good. She's good with, she's talking about something else. Don't you run out of here.
I'm counting how much candy you're eating.
Oh, no. It's bad.
I never do that. Never. But this, you put it for me.
So are you leading the budget? You want me to lead? Or? I don't, is she leading all of it?
She leading all of it.
Okay.
Now you're really good.
Oh, I have somebody reached out about an event tomorrow at Hope Church, and I can't go. It's in your district.
So I'm going.
Yeah, 6 to 7:30. Okay. If you want to meet the pastor or anything at the church, then you can shoot.
Okay, she's doing a thing. Let's get this started.
I didn't get a location.
It's just, they just put this one right here. Hey, we have your attention, please. Hello. Hello. If you can hear me, clap once.
Right.
Did you hear me? If you can hear me, clap once.
Come on, classroom strategy.
We are ready to start because we do have a special call meeting in a little while. Our audit, budget, finance committee meeting. 2.01, we're in the hands of our superintendent.
All right. Mr. Langston, financial update.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. If you can go to the next slide. So jumping right in, Commissioner, Superintendent. So this is the financials ending April 30th, 2024. So overall, the district revenues increased $151.1 million over last fiscal year. The district recognized a $4.7 million increase for local sources. It's primarily due to investment income being up. We had an increase also of $156.8 million due to the state of Tennessee. So again, with TISA coming in, we received more money this time of this year than as of last year. And then finally, we also had a small increase in indirect costs due to some of our federal funds. Now going to expenditures. With additional revenues come in additional expenditures. We had an increase of expenditures of $174.7 million over the last fiscal year. The notable variances are listed here. There are going to be a net of decreases and increases. We had a net decrease of 27.3% in our professional services due to a decrease in our outside legal services. We had a decrease of 39% in our property maintenance services. It's primarily due to an implementation of GASB 87 for reclassifying leases, software subscriptions, and network infrastructure. We had an increase of 63.3% in contracted services, primarily due to our custodial contracts, transportation, and nursing contracts. Supplies and materials had an increase of 57.7%. We purchased new textbooks this year with a math adoption as well as software. And then finally, our charter schools increased 22.6%. So with the new monies coming in for TISA, we passed along more monies for charter schools. If you can go to the next slide. Now looking at a departmental level, again, we'll talk about year-over-year variances. First, in the academic office, we saw an increase of 13.9%. We did ESL retention bonuses this year as opposed to not doing them last year. Our academic operations and student support had an increase of 13.5%. That's again due to increase in OT and PT services for SPED, as well as we spent an additional amount for our summer learning camps that's housed in our general fund. Our Chief of Communications Office increased 24.6%. We did some additional marketing, advertisement, and rental of equipment this year. General Counsel had an increase of 44.5%. As you remember, the cost of insurance for our property went up this year. Lastly, Human Capital and Talent Management increased 26%. Is because we had an increase for substitute teachers. If you can go to the next slide, we'll talk about our capital projects. So there are 3 active county appropriations for an overall budget of $71.6 million. Through the month of April, we've spent $17.6 million, and we've encumbered a little over $30 million. There is $23.8 million in uncommitted funds, and the uncommitted funds are mainly due to the new high schools. Next slide. So in our fiscal 22 appropriations, we have 2 open projects, which are in the design phase for Fraser. If you remember, we actually started designing Fraser back in FY22. So those designs are in FY22. So that's why that project is open and ongoing until we finish Fraser. Next slide. In fiscal year 23, the appropriation, we have 4 open projects. All of those projects are forecasted to be completed by the end of this fiscal year 2024. Next slide. In fiscal year 24, the appropriations again are the 2 open projects, are the 2 new high schools, the new East Region High School and the new Fraser High Schools. Obviously, those projects are still ongoing. Next slide. So the next slide gives you a look into the investments that we made for our fund balance, which is about $58.8 million. There are 22 projects that are open. They include roof replacements, HVACs, as well as other deferred maintenance projects. Then finally, next slide, we'll talk about ESSER. We do have 22 open projects for ESSER 3.0. The budget is $38.5 million. We've spent $31 million, and we have encumbered $5.3 million. We do have a $1 million pending requisition for ESSER 3.0. These projects, again, are slated to be completed by the end of fiscal year 2024. I'll take any questions now on our financials.
In general, are we on track to spend all of our relief dollars? Like, do we have any concerns on projects that we've not yet written a check for?
So no concerns, as you'll always hear me state. We'll ESSER 1, we spent every penny. ESSER 2, we spent every penny. ESSER 3 will do the same. I will tell you that I was expected to hear from the state as of yesterday. Hopefully, by the time we get out of here today, I would have heard that they're going to extend the liquidation period. That'll just help us make some additional moves if we choose to do so. Even if they choose not to, I fully expect us to spend every penny. Right now, the date is December 14th of 2024.
As far as there was some concern, I think at one point regarding charter schools and whether or not they were on track with their ESSER dollars. Can you just give me an update on what's happening there?
Great question. So the charters are, and we're finalizing doing reimbursement requests for them. Usually they give around anywhere between $2 to $5 million as an aggregate between them back to us. And what we do is just we repurpose those dollars. So we've done a better job of communicating with them on ESSER 3. So they have really honed in and spending their dollars. But in some cases, we have to give them a deadline because we have to liquidate. I am expecting them to send anywhere between $2 to $5 million, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But when you consider they got $140 million over the course of ESSERs 1, 2, and 3, it's really not that much. And we plan to repurpose those dollars in some existing projects that we have.
Okay, thank you.
First, I want to thank you. 2 schools in my district, the stadiums got upgraded. Finally. My question is around the intercoms. Can you give us an update on which schools have gotten their intercom systems completely updated, as well as the stadium lighting and the outdoor lighting for our school buildings?
Great question, Ms. Coleman. If you remember, we had phases of intercoms. Most of them is finalized and design phases. If you will allow me to, we can get that for you. Can we get it for today? We're gonna get that for you today, Ms. Coleman, and then give you any updates of additional phases that we have for intercom. So again, some of them you'll see in our phases where we have fire, life, safety, because it's all around safety. But we'll get that to you. So I don't want to. I'm pretty good off the top of my head, but I don't want to be wrong this time.
And can you provide an update for me as well regarding Bellevue? What's just everything? There's a lot of need there. What's the, not right now, but via email?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You want to just overall update of Bellevue?
Bellevue specifically, but if there's anything else pressing, that's the one I certainly hear from the most.
Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you.
A question about the variances that you mentioned at the top. So for example, academic office, you said was ESL retention bonuses.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they help? Did it work?
So this year, what I will say is that our ESL population increased tremendously again this year. So what we did see is that we did have fewer vacancies in our ESL classrooms. What we also saw, though, is we had a larger number of students identified. That's why Board Member Calvo was looking at me, because he and I have had that lengthy discussion. So we did have to increase the amount of teachers. So I will say, to not ramble, yes, it did help, but we are still actively looking for even more ways as we continue to push that increase in the number of ESL students being served.
I think in our next budget conversation, that kind of context is helpful. Like, investing money is great. Just, is it working? Is it worth, are there emergency contracts if we don't do this? Are we the most, is it most efficient for us to do it? I think the other thing that stood out was substitutes. So I would just like us to think about how we can create stability. And I know we want every classroom to have a highly qualified teacher in the front of every room, but and absent of that, how are we rethinking the way we do substitutes?
That's a great idea. I don't want to speak out of turn, Madam Superintendent, but I'm pretty sure we can bring you a plan. But I will say that I expect a big win of what we announced on Tuesday, and being able to increase salaries and being the highest paid, certainly in the area that's going to help us get certified teachers. We want to make sure we get substitutes, and we're going to want to make sure every class is filled when school starts, but then obviously we want to increase. I know you remember the 72% fill rate.
I do.
We want to make sure that it's increased for next year, so when we do need subs, so we'll provide a plan.
Okay, thank you.
Generally shared this with the team just yet in terms of thinking about how we fuel classes when we don't have someone there. So I won't share it here just yet, but I will share it. I haven't shared it with them because it includes them. You know it. Everybody's a sub. Everybody's a substitute. Everyone will contribute overall. So, but I'll share that out as we share out, specific details about how we move forward organizationally. But I'll share that in detail as a comprehensive plan.
Can you give me an elevator explanation? I'm happy to meet one-on-one with you on this dashboard. So this is the year-to-date financial capital spend summary. So I think I have three big questions. One is, how much time do we have to spend money that was appropriated, like in 22, then 23, 24? I, in general terms, understand what an encumbrance is, but in general, is that money that is tied? And finally, I know we still have $22 million left for this year. Are we on track to spend that? Yeah, so just kind of high level, and I'm happy to follow up on a one-on-one.
Great question. So, and we've actually done a yeoman's job over the past years attacking these projects as well. But to answer your question sharply, 22 money, we have a while we have the opportunity to spend it. We just can't reallocate it. So where you see those things encumbered, we actually plan to finish them by the end of this fiscal year. But as long as it's encumbered, we still have the opportunity to spend it. And after that year has surpassed, so taking it for fiscal year 22, once we get to 23, we can't reallocate it. We just have to
what you said you
spend what we said we would spend. And then to your last question about 24, that 22 million is just really tied to the new high schools. So as we start breaking ground on high schools, we'll start spending those funds. That's what's been allocated for this year so far. And why you don't see the full amount is because it's a full 5-year CIP plan. So as they continue to approve budgets, we'll continue to add to those lines and spend the money for the high schools.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions on the finances? All right, we'll move to item 2.2, and that's the general update for new schools. And so I'll just provide a few updates for the board. The schematic design and development design, we've completed that for phase 1. So our phase 1 redesign is now underway this is specifically for the new Fraser High School. So, of course, the mayor did reach out and, suggest with valid, context and reasoning to reassess and take a look at the 1,500 that we were planning for the building and think more closely to 1,000 in terms of capacity. And so where we landed when I met with the architects and the construction and the team as well is to land with the 1,000 in terms of capacity, but allow for expansion. So if there is growth, we are not stuck, if you will. There's room to renovate and add, a wing or whatever is necessary to support additional students. And so I think that was a general compromise where we landed there. So that future seat expansion both meets the current need as we think about projected enrollment, but also allows for expansion. Phase 2, that's the on-site CCTE, STEM labs, auxiliary gym, performing arts classrooms. And then phase 3, which includes the baseball and the softball fields, those designs, we anticipate they will begin soon, and then we'll be able to include feedback from students and community members, alumni, those who are asking, how do we get our voice in? We haven't forgotten, we're just really in the early design stages. And so as we move into these additional phases, we'll be able to include and have those community engagement sessions. And so do have the team working on that, what that looks like. So we provide ample time in terms of communication and allowing individuals to be in part or to be involved in more ways than one to share how they'd like for their space to look on the other side. And so these particular phases, I will add, those are contingent upon those additional funds that we're currently identifying. And so while we have encumbered and already set aside, if you will, the funds necessary for the design, which is the process that we're in, on the other side of that is actually getting into the weeds of it, the phase 2 and 3, which are those labs and classrooms, and then the development of the fields. The early release package 1, this consists of fencing and earthwork, and so that was bid and it's in the process of being awarded. And so we expected, I think that began March 15th, or this is May 15th, we expect to begin there. And then the additional early release package, which includes the demolition and the retaining walls, that's expected to be executed later this month. The project is still on track to be completed by fall 2027, and so we've generally shared that, and I've maintained a commitment to the same short of unforeseen circumstances presenting themselves. The transition supports meetings, these are being held bi-weekly, and so those are to ensure our support is being offered at our 3 schools, Tresvent, Craigmont, and Raleigh, Egypt. They are expected to receive the majority of schools that are transitioning from MLK this fall, although we know that, students can choose where they'd like to go. Any questions on the new Fraser update?
How does the mayor feel and the commission feel about, the overall funding, kind of given the, I know there have been some stops and goes on that. I'm not talking even about Cordova, I'm talking about just that particular one because it's farther away.
Yeah, so the general commitment to the funding exists. I think how that shapes out is probably what's on the table for discussion between the mayor and the county commission.
But that's not our problem.
That's not on.
That's them.
Yeah, so that is what their commitment has been, and so it is just about where they will find it or how they will shift. And I know that if anyone was paying attention to the budget presentation, I think the ask of me was, were we willing to explore kind of moving some of those funds? And so where I have stood and where the district maintains our stance is we're committed to the new bills as we've shared with the public, and certainly the expectation is that we're able to fund them, 100% as the design calls for.
I had a quick question. The compromise for potential later expansion, what was the overall capital savings from going from 1,500 to 1,000?
I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I remember it just being very, respectfully minimal, which is why we were able to just kind of land at that 1,000 and allow for expansion. Very minimal, even when the mayor looked at it. It just wasn't a dramatic shift. But the greatest emphasis that we wanted was to not change the actual design, what we were committing to.
Still having the amenities of
Right,
the building. Yep,
right.
okay, thank you.
And it's 1,000. Was that the compromise because of the funding, or is that right size for? And we don't know. To your point, we don't know how many students will actually migrate.
Yeah.
Move to the school, but.
So it was a balance between looking at what actually exists right now when you consider birth rates, you consider the general enrollment, the growth or lack thereof of the respective community, while also considering if you build it, they will come. Nice, beautiful building, attracts individuals. But what I share with the team is, okay, can we sustain that? How many will stay? So even if they show up, will they stay? And so that's how we landed at, let's build for the 1,000 with the opportunity to expand seating capacity where necessary.
Okay.
How are we working like with the city or the county in terms of residents? I've seen billboards, like Frazier is the new hot thing. You can buy, cheaper to own a home than to rent.
Yeah.
And so any sort of projections there with the city to try to anticipate maybe growth of students?
Right. So in individual sessions or meetings, huddles with county commissioners, for sure, they are engaging in some conversations that align with just that ask about how to expand and really make the community, a robust one, return it to the days of the old, for lack of better words, right? And so they are looking at some investments over there in terms of housing development. And so we were able to have that conversation with a few of the with a few of the commissioners, specifically there. What I did share is not quite sure what that does for enrollment, because we don't know who would be there. We don't know if they're bringing children, what the age or demographics would be in terms of those who are already, well beyond. They've sent their children on to college. And so who would actually occupy the spaces still would dictate what this enrollment could be. So while we are hopeful and optimistic that we can draw in from having just a commitment, to a space that will serve needs there and have some robust programs and pathways and courses, it's also just really looking at the data that exists right now that demonstrates a natural, just a decline.
Okay.
I will add, it's not just that area. So just nationally, if we look at, rates, birth rates are down. People just aren't wanting to have children, So I imagine, there might be a little bit of thought going into that, but it is not just Memphis. I know it's easy to believe that, it is just us and we are not, and it's not. So I want to be clear about that and let the record reflect that these are national trends. And so when you look at birth rates, when you look at how people transition and navigate in and out of cities, it's not just Memphis. It was the same in previous spaces that I've been in. And so when we look at the numbers there and we look at them here, we're in a comparable experience, a comparable space.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Onto the New East Region High School. Project is, currently the same as in the schematic design phase as well. The total square footage, just over 431,000, will require continued scope refinement. So meaning what is actually going in there. This does include circulation space, but as we think about the current programs that are offered, we want to make sure that we're providing the same. So we'll continue to refine that as we're in this early design phase. The team is also preparing for the land use control board application and approval process. And so I'll send this timeline to you all, but for sure, the application deadline, what we know is May 10th. And so the neighborhood meeting, we'll schedule that for May 30th. And then we'll attend the land use control board meeting on June 13th. And then we'll look for city council approval on July 9th. and then they'll have their first reading. City Council will on July 23rd, and then the land purchase closing is sometime in August. And so this is just high-level overview of where we are. Of course, when you're in that early design phase, just not a lot to offer, even in terms of cost or what's happening, but what we are committed to is having the architects themselves. They'll be here at our June meetings. Okay, that concludes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. That concludes the committee meetings on this afternoon. Board members, we do have a special call meeting at 5 p.m., so if you want to move around for a few moments, we'll be up on the podium at 5 o'clock to get 4:55, so we can get started at 5. Yes, sir, I am talking to you.